All right, hey, what is up? My name is Gene. I'm a photographer here in Chicago, and actually I need to address something because I just posted a video very recently on what's in my camera bag. And some of you actually caught that the audio in that video didn't actually sound like it was coming from the Shure SM7B because it actually wasn't. It was attached to this recorder, but what actually happened was I was not recording in the right channel. So I had to end up using the audio that was coming from the mic on the camera. So please don't roast me. I'm still trying to figure all this out. With that being said though, I'm hoping that the audio in this video is much better because I see the levels moving up and down. This video is going to be about the camera that I've been using for almost 7 months now, but the camera is the Canon R6. I don't really know why people say EOS R, but then they don't say EOS R6. I don't actually understand that. So if you understand, please explain it to me. But I just wanted to share some of my thoughts and my experience on shooting on the R6 and what that's been like for almost 7 months now. Some of my thoughts, some of the things I find as pros, some of the cons. And if you're in the market for buying the R6, then hopefully this video will be informative in giving you an idea of what the camera may be like for you. Let's just dive right into it. Before I even get to the pros and cons, I just want to talk about the user experience for me. So I've been a Canon shooter for the entirety of my photography career. So I need to note that in the very beginning because in a lot of ways, that's formulated my experience on this camera. I will say transitioning from like the 5D3 to the 5D4 to the EOS R and now the R6, that transition has been very seamless for me. I think something that Canon gets knocked on a lot is how they're slow to release technology in their cameras. But I think the caveat to that is that the cameras that they do release are solid cameras, both in physical build, and I would also argue in the specs that they release too, that they're pretty good. I will get into some of the cons of the camera later on, but just for Canon's kind of shot at mirrorless for the past couple of years now with the EOS R, the RP, and now the R6 and the R5. And I know that they have some other cameras like the M50. I really do like this camera a lot. And then some other notes on my experience on this camera is it's a fantastic hybrid camera. I know that people knock on this camera not being the best video camera, but I don't think it was made for that purpose. I don't think it was made to be the best mirrorless video camera. But as far as being a hybrid shooter, I really think that this camera is market leading. I think that on the photo side especially, it's just incredible. And then this is not for everyone's situation, but at least in my context, a lot of my friends do shoot Canon. So whether that's friends who are shooting on cinema cameras that are Canon cameras or shooting on mirrorless or DSLRs, being able to swap gear and to share lenses and batteries is very helpful for me at least. Again, that's not for everyone's situation, but at least for me in my context, with being a Canon shooter and having other friends who are Canon shooters, it is very nice to share and swap gear. With all that being said, now let's just kind of dive into some of the pros and cons with what I've experienced in using this camera so far. So a couple of the pros, especially from my experience moving from the R to the R6, is the dual card slot. I know that's not a deal breaker for everyone, but for me being primarily a wedding photographer, having dual card slots is nice. It's nice having day of that redundancy and understanding and knowing that there's comfort when a card, if it does ever fail, which thankfully has never happened, that the photos are still writing to another card. So the dual card slot is phenomenal. I don't even think that I have to really say it, but the autofocus, the dual pixel autofocus in this camera is insane, just like it was when we got it in the 5D4 and the R. It's been improved in this camera. So it's phenomenal. The eye tracking is great. I use this camera almost always on autofocus and it's very reliable. So I love the autofocus. And then some other things is, although everyone's budget is different, for I think the specs that this camera offers, it's offered at a very reasonable price. With the file sizes that you get, they're very manageable. So I know that with other cameras, whether you're shooting medium format or even the R5, the files are much larger. And at times, if you're running an older machine, you may run into some issues with speed or even backing up images. But on this camera, at least, because the file sizes are very manageable, they're very easy to have backup and also to edit. And then a few other pros is the battery life is great. It takes the LP6 just like a lot of the other Canon cameras do. And they did release a newer version of that battery that's supposed to offer longer battery life when they released the R6 and R5. And then the other thing that's great, and Canon's honestly done this for a long time, where I think competitors are now beginning to fold it into their camera builds, but it's the tilt screen. The tilt screen is fantastic because if I'm ever shooting from a vantage point that's super low or super high, or I'm doing video where I need to see the screen itself and see kind of my composition. And then the last thing is I actually don't own any RF glass. So I can't really speak on what the RF glass is like on this system, but I've heard wonderful things that the RF glass is incredible. It's fast, it's crisp, the colors are great out of them, what they render. The only con I would say with RF glass is the price tag, at least for what's the equivalent to L series glass, is RF glass is just very expensive. So again, I don't necessarily think that you have to get into the RF glass system if you don't want to, but I've invested primarily, actually all my glass in just Canon L series glass. And what's really nice about the R system is with the adapters that they offer, like the control ring one that you can control certain settings like your aperture, your shutter speed, having the built-in ND adapter, and then just their plain adapter. I find that when you adapt EF glass to it, which is what I do, I don't really notice any speed degradation in autofocus or any issues with connecting the lenses to the body when you're using that adapter. All right, so we've covered some pros of, at least in my opinion, some of the strengths of this camera, but I do think it's only fair to mention some of the things I see as cons in the R6 as well. I think the biggest con is the overheating. I know that that was a huge issue when the R5 and R6 first came out, but I have noticed when I'm shooting video for a very long extended period of time that the overheating icon pops up, and if you go for too long, then the camera will shut down. So that's obviously a big con, but with that being said, there are some workarounds. And one of the workarounds that I've opted to do is to shoot to my Atomos Ninja 5 with an SSD in it. And there's some other perks of doing that, like being able to shoot ProRes. But with shooting directly to the SSD that's in my monitor as opposed to into the camera, it's bypassed that overheating issue. So I actually never get that overheating issue anymore. Even when I make these talking head videos like this where I'm talking for 10, 20, 30 minutes, I don't see that icon pop up anymore. I know that's a con for a lot of people. I know that especially if you're trying to do video work, that is going to be something that you need to figure out. But on the photo side, there are no issues with the overheating. So at least in my experience, shooting 10, 12-hour wedding days, I have never seen that overheating icon pop up when I'm shooting photos. Another con, and this is not a big one, is that currently the R6 only has the ability to shoot in C-Log. The R5 actually very recently released an update where you can now shoot C-Log 3, and there's rumors that this will also take place for the R6. Again, not a deal breaker for video shooters. From what I've heard and what I've seen, the dynamic range in C-Log 3 is much better than C-Log, and so I'm waiting for that update to happen for the R6, but being able to shoot in C-Log is fine for what I do. Another con, which is not a big one for me, is the megapixel count on the camera, which is 20. For some, depending on what kind of work you do, that might be too low. But for me, shooting mostly weddings, portraits, interior work, and doing commercial work, I have never found an issue with shooting on this camera with that megapixel count. And I guess the last con that, at least in my experience, is it's definitely not a leader in being a mirrorless camera for video. There are, I would argue, other cameras that are much better as far as specs and technology in the bodies that allow you to stretch the camera's capabilities further. It's just not, I don't think this camera was designed to be primarily a video camera. I really think that as a hybrid camera, especially on the photo side, it's incredibly strong. And I think for anyone who is a hybrid shooter like myself, who does both photo and video, the R6 is fantastic. But if you're looking strictly to do video, and that's primarily your job, I don't know if the R6 is the best fit for you, but I've heard wonderful things about the R5. And I think cinema cameras are becoming more affordable now, whether it's with the C70 that Canon released, I think last year. So there's other options I think out there for people who are strictly video shooters. And I'm most definitely not a Canon fanboy. Like, it's just simply what I've used for the entirety of my career because it fits the way that I shoot. And I like the menu system, it's simple. the editing the photos and the video is simple. So I just like the simplicity in the system just because it allows me to focus more on the creativity and not so much on the technicality. With that being said, those are some of my thoughts on this camera, on the Canon R6. It's a camera that, again, I really do enjoy using, and truthfully, even the cons are very small cons, at least for the way that I work. Hopefully, if you're in the market for an R6 or you've been curious about this camera and how it kind of stacks up compared to the competitors of this camera, hopefully this video gave you a little more information on what this camera is like. And again, just my experience with using this camera, I really do like it, so much so that I do shoot on an R as well, but I will most likely upgrade my R to another R6 as well. Thank you for your support. If you don't mind, I would love it if you liked and subscribed. Do you guys like videos like this of me kind of reviewing technology and camera stuff? It's something that I find time and time again that I watch a lot of these videos, not because I'm like a gearhead or I love gear so much, but I'm always just curious on technology, what's available, what's on the horizon, and kind of just seeing what all these camera brands are doing. Again, I appreciate you guys watching. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you want more videos like this, because I have more ideas, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye. Hopefully the audio is good for this one. I really hope so. Bye, Bean. Yeah, because the audio was messed up last time. So also let me know if the audio sounds good. If not, I'll keep getting better. Okay,